I'm not ready to get married yet, but I don't want to lose you. How about we date other people while we're still engaged? You know, like insurance. Graham Whitlock slid his phone across the white tablecloth at Maria, the Michelin-starred restaurant where we'd celebrated our engagement 6 months earlier. The screen glowed between the untouched Dover sole and my half-empty wine glass. I stared at the display, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Tinder. His profile, fully complete. The profile picture made my stomach drop. It was us at last month's Children's Hospital Charity Gala, the one where I'd worn my grandmother's emerald necklace. Except in this version, I'd been cropped out. Just Graham in his Tom Ford tuxedo, smiling at something off camera, the camera I'd been holding. I've already matched with 12 women, he continued, cutting into his steak with the same precision he used to dissect opposing counsel's arguments. You should try it too. It's only fair. The restaurant's ambient noise, the clink of silverware, the murmur of Manhattan's elite discussing mergers and summer homes in the Hamptons, felt suddenly distant, as if someone had wrapped me in cotton wool. I looked at the man across from me, the corporate attorney who'd proposed on a sailboat in the Sound, who'd helped me design the invitations with our initials intertwined, who'd spent the last 3 weeks arguing with the florist about centerpiece heights. Insurance, I repeated, the word tasting foreign in my mouth. Exactly. Graham's smile was the same one he used in courtroom photos, the ones plastered across Whitlock and Hartwick's website. Confident? Reasonable? The kind of smile that made opposing parties settle before trial. Look, Simone, I've been thinking about this a lot. Marriage is forever, right? Or it's supposed to be. But we're modern people. We believe in honesty, transparency. What if we date other people now, get it out of our systems, and then we'll know for sure we're making the right choice? He reached across the table, his hand covering mine, the same hand that had slipped a 3-carat diamond onto my finger at sunset, promising forever. His thumb traced circles on my knuckles, a gesture that used to make me melt. This way, he said softly, there are no regrets, no what-ifs. We go into this marriage with our eyes wide open, knowing we chose each other despite having options. Doesn't that sound more secure than just hoping we're enough for each other? The logic was there, wrapped in the same persuasive cadence he used to convince juries. But something underneath it felt wrong, like biting into fruit that looked perfect, but had started rotting from the inside. How long have you been thinking about this? I asked. A few weeks. He withdrew his hand to take a sip of his Barolo. Maybe a month. I wanted to make sure I was presenting it the right way. I know it's unconventional, but so were a lot of things that are normal now. Open relationships, ethical, non-monogamy. It's all just evolved thinking, you know? And you already made a profile. Well, I wanted to test the concept first, see if it was even viable. His eyes held that earnest look he'd perfected, the one that made clients trust him with their most sensitive legal matters. I wasn't going to do anything without talking to you first. But look, 12 matches in 3 days. That's how I know there's a market for this arrangement. You're gorgeous, Simone. You'd probably get even more. A market. He was describing our relationship using acquisition terminology. The waiter appeared to refill water glasses, and we both fell silent, performing the charade of a couple. Enjoying an intimate dinner, I noticed things I'd somehow missed before. The way Graham's attention drifted to a woman at the bar, the way his fingers drummed impatiently against his phone case, the way he'd positioned the device so the screen faced me, but he could still see notifications from the corner of his eye. When the waiter retreated, Graham leaned forward. Come on. Simone, you're a heritage property manager. You understand the value of exploring all options before committing to a purchase. It's due diligence. Relationship, due diligence. The comparison made something cold settle in my chest. The Ashford, the historic 12-story building my great-grandmother had developed in 1946, wasn't just property to me. It was legacy, family, history. The penthouse where I lived, where we'd planned to start our married life, had been in my family for 3 generations. But Graham saw it as an acquisition. What if I say no? I asked quietly. His expression shifted, just slightly. The warmth dimmed, replaced by something more calculating. Then I guess we're not as compatible as I thought. I'm being honest with you, Simone. Radical honesty. That's the foundation of any strong partnership. If you can't handle that, if you need some fairy tale version of romance instead of reality, he trailed off, the implication hanging between us like smoke. If I couldn't handle reality, I wasn't mature enough for marriage. That's what he was saying. That my discomfort with his proposal was a character flaw, not a reasonable boundary. I picked up my wine glass, buying time. The Sancerre had gone warm, slightly bitter. Across the restaurant, I could see other couples, some laughing, some holding hands, some in the comfortable silence of long-term partnership. None of them appeared to be negotiating open relationships over Dover's soul. I need time to think, I finally said. Of course. Graham's smile returned, victorious. He'd presented his opening argument, and I hadn't walked out. In his mind, that was already a win. Take all the time you need. The wedding's not for 6 weeks. We have time to explore this properly. He flagged down the waiter for the check, and I watched him pull out the black American Express card he'd only recently qualified for, after making junior partner at Whitlock and Hartwick. The same partnership he'd been chasing for 4 years. The one that required a certain image, stable, married, established. The kind of image that came with a wife from old New York money, a wife whose family owned prime Manhattan real estate. If you've ever met someone who made you doubt your own instincts, who could make wrong sound reasonable and reasonable sound paranoid, like and subscribe, because sometimes your gut is the only thing that can save you. We left Maria, and Graham walked me to my car, his hand on the small of my back, playing the role of devoted fiancé for the restaurant's valet. He kissed me goodnight, tender and sweet, as if he hadn't just suggested we audition his replacement. Think about it, he murmured against my ear. Really think about what I'm offering, freedom and security, the best of both worlds. I drove back to the Ashford in a daze, the city lights blurring through what might have been tears, or might have been rain starting to streak the windshield. The building stood on the corner of 72nd and Lexington, its Art Deco facade glowing under carefully maintained exterior lighting. My great-grandmother's legacy, built during a time when women weren't supposed to be real estate developers, when she'd had to use her husband's name on permits because her own wasn't enough. The doorman greeted me warmly, and I took the private elevator to the penthouse, the one that required a key only 3 people possessed. Me, my parents who spent most of their time at their estate in Connecticut, and Graham, who I'd given a key to last Christmas. The penthouse was dark when I entered, but I didn't turn on the lights. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the city spreading out below like a glittering promise. This was my home, my inheritance, my future. Graham and I had planned to raise our children here, to host Thanksgiving dinners, to grow old, watching the seasons change over the park. But now I couldn't stop thinking about that Tinder profile, about the casual way he'd presented his 12 matches, about the term relationship due diligence applied to our life together. I picked up my phone and did what I'd sworn I wouldn't do. I downloaded Tinder, not to use it, not to find matches of my own, but to see if I could find his profile, to see what he'd written, what version of himself he was presenting to those 12 women. It took less than 5 minutes of scrolling. There he was, 36 years old, attorney at a prestigious firm, looking for meaningful connections with intelligent, ambitious women. The bio made no mention of a fiancé, no mention of an open relationship, no mention of this being some kind of pre-marriage exploration. Just a single man, available and interested. I took screenshots, though I wasn't sure why. Evidence for what? For myself? For some hypothetical future conversation? The next morning, I woke to 3 texts from Graham. The first was sweet. Good morning, beautiful. Missed waking up next to you. The second was practical. Meeting with estate planning attorney at 10. Then lunch with Owen. Dinner tonight? The third made me pause. Been thinking more about our conversation. This is going to be so good for us. Estate planning attorney. We discussed that last month, updating our wills and beneficiaries before the wedding. Graham had said it was standard procedure, the kind of thing responsible couples did. But we'd already met with his attorney twice. Why? A third meeting? I texted back something non-committal about being busy with work and made coffee, trying to organize my thoughts. The Ashford needed my attention. There was a historical preservation committee meeting next week, and one of the second-floor tenants was requesting approval for kitchen renovations that required careful review of original architectural plans. My job as heritage property manager meant maintaining the building's character while ensuring modern livability, a balance my grandmother had taught me before she passed. But I couldn't focus. Graham's words from the night before kept playing on repeat. You understand the value of exploring all options before committing to a purchase? Purchase, not partnership, not love. Purchase. I called my office and told them I'd be working from home, then did something I'd never done before. I looked up Graham's calendar. He'd given me access months ago, one of those relationship transparency gestures that seemed sweet at the time. Proof that he had nothing to hide, that I could see every meeting, every appointment, every moment of his professional life. 10 o'clock, just as he'd mentioned. Estate planning review, Chambers and Associates. But that wasn't the firm we'd used before. We'd worked with Rothstein and Partners, the estate planning specialists Graham had personally recommended. Why switch firms? I Googled Chambers and Associates. Small practice, 3 attorneys, specializing in complex asset protection, and I read the description twice to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. Sensitive family law matters, including prenuptial agreements, asset concealment strategies, and divorce preparation. Asset concealment, divorce preparation. My coffee had gone cold in my hands, but I barely noticed. I kept reading their website, clicking through practice areas, reading reviews. Chambers and Associates helped people protect assets from spouses, helped people prepare for divorces before marriages even began, helped people build legal walls around their money. Graham had a meeting with them in 90 minutes. Without fully processing what I was doing, I got dressed. Jeans, a blazer, sunglasses that covered half my face. I told myself I was being paranoid, that there was probably a reasonable explanation. Maybe Chambers and Associates did general estate planning too. Maybe Google's summary was incomplete. But I drove to their office anyway, a discreet brownstone on the Upper East Side, 3 blocks from Central Park. I parked across the street, feeling ridiculous, feeling like a character in one of those psychological thrillers where the wife slowly discovers her husband's secret life. Graham arrived at 9:55, punctual as always. He wore his navy suit, the one he saved for important meetings, and carried his leather briefcase, the one embossed with his initials. I watched him check his phone before entering, watched the confident set of his shoulders as he climbed the steps. I sat in my car for the full hour he was inside, scrolling through my phone, checking email, trying not to imagine what was being discussed behind those brick walls. When he finally emerged, he wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, mid-20s, attractive in that polished professional way, carrying a portfolio folder. They stood on the steps talking, and I watched Graham laugh at something she said, watched him touch her arm in a gesture that could have been friendly or could have been something more. Then he handed her a business card, and she walked away. And Graham checked his phone again before heading to his car. My phone buzzed with a text. Meeting ran long, grabbing lunch alone. See you tonight. Want to continue our conversation from yesterday? He'd lied. He'd said lunch with Owen Hartwick, his mentor at the firm, the senior partner who championed Graham's rise through the ranks. But Owen wasn't at this meeting, just Graham and the mysterious woman with the portfolio. I waited until Graham's car disappeared around the corner before I approached the brownstone. The directory inside the lobby was small, discreet. Chambers and Associates, 3rd floor. No other tenants. This entire building was their practice. I stood in that lobby for a full minute, trying to decide if I was crossing a line, if suspicion justified action. Then I thought about the Tinder profile, about relationship due diligence, about asset concealment strategies, and I climbed the stairs. The receptionist was young, probably an intern or paralegal. She looked up from her computer with a practiced smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "I'm here to pick up documents for Graham Whitlock," I said, keeping my voice steady. "He asked me to grab them since I was in the neighborhood." The receptionist's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Whitlock took all his materials with him. He was quite clear that nothing should remain in the office. All his materials. Not just today's meeting notes, all of them, suggesting multiple visits." "Oh, I must have misunderstood," I said quickly. "My mistake. Thank you." I left before she could ask any more questions, my heart pounding as I reached the street. Graham had been here multiple times. He'd met with divorce preparation specialists multiple times. While planning our wedding, while discussing our future, while giving me that 3-carat diamond, he'd been consulting with lawyers who helped people hide assets from their spouses. I drove back to the Ashford on autopilot, my mind trying to connect pieces that didn't quite fit. The Tinder profile, the estate planning attorney who specialized in asset protection, the woman with the portfolio, the casual suggestion that we date other people 6 weeks before our wedding. Insurance, he'd called it. But insurance against what? Against making a mistake? Or insurance that he'd secured his claim to something else, something that had nothing to do with love or commitment or partnership. I parked in the building's garage and took the elevator back to the penthouse, but this time I went straight to my office, the small room overlooking 72nd Street, where I kept all the building's important documents: property deeds, historical records, maintenance contracts, insurance policies. And there, in a manila folder I'd looked through just last month, I found something that didn't belong. An appraisal document for the Ashford penthouse, dated 3 weeks ago. Market value, $4.7 million. Conducted by Sterling Property Assessments, a firm I'd never heard of, certainly never hired. The accompanying letter was addressed to Graham at his office. "Per your request, please find the completed assessment of the property located at the Ashford, Unit PHA. This appraisal is suitable for insurance purposes, loan applications, or asset verification proceedings." My hands shook as I held the paper. Graham had ordered an appraisal of my home without telling me. My home, the one my family had owned for 79 years, the one that wasn't his property, wasn't even close to being his property. I checked the date again. 3 weeks ago, the same week he'd suggested we update our insurance policies, the same week he'd said it was routine maintenance for people getting married. I'd thought he was being responsible, thoughtful even. But he hadn't been updating our insurance. He'd been appraising my inheritance. The phone rang, making me jump. Graham's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times before answering. "Hey. Hey yourself. You sound weird. Everything okay?" "Fine. Just busy with building stuff. You know how preservation committees can be." "Right. The meeting next week." His voice was warm, concerned. The same tone he'd used when my grandmother passed away, when I'd needed him most. "Listen, about tonight, I was thinking we could order in. Maybe talk more about what we discussed. I really think once you process it, you'll see this is the healthiest thing we could do for our relationship." The healthy thing. Dating other people was healthy. Meeting with asset concealment attorneys was healthy. Appraising my family's property without my knowledge was healthy. "Actually, I'm not feeling well," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. My stomach had been churning since I'd found the appraisal. "Rain check? Of course. Feel better, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too," I said, automatically, the words hollow. After we hung up, I sat at my desk until the light outside shifted from afternoon gold to evening blue. I took photos of the appraisal document, careful to capture every page, every stamp, every signature. Then I sent them to someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Theodore Kim, my childhood friend, who'd grown up in the apartment 2 floors down, who'd become a real estate attorney specializing in property law. My text was simple. Can you look at this? Something feels off. Theo's response came within minutes. Holy cow! Where did you get this? Found it in my files. Not sure how it got there. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, this is a full market appraisal, the kind you get for major transactions: refinancing, sale preparation, asset division in divorce proceedings. Why would Graham order this on your property? The question I'd been avoiding suddenly had a witness, someone else who saw what I was seeing, who confirmed that this wasn't paranoia or insecurity or pre-wedding jitters. I don't know, I typed back, even though I was starting to. Simone. Theo's next message appeared almost immediately. I need you to check something. Can you access your property records? Like official city records? I have copies in my office. Why? Check for any recent activity. Transfers, liens, mortgage applications. Check everything. I pulled up the digital records I kept, the ones automatically updated from the city registry. The property had been in the Ashford family name since 1946, with various trusts and transfers as generations passed. The most recent update was from 5 years ago when my grandmother's estate was settled, transferring the penthouse deeds solely into my name. But there, at the bottom of the recent activity log, was an entry from 2 weeks ago. Document request, property transfer draft. My blood went cold. Theo, I typed with shaking fingers. There's a property transfer draft from 2 weeks ago. Do not tell Graham you found this. Can you come to my office? Tomorrow morning, early. Bring everything. I agreed and set my phone down, staring at the city lights beginning to glow across the skyline. A property transfer draft meant someone had started the paperwork to move ownership of my home, started the legal process to take the penthouse my great-grandmother had built, my grandmother had cherished, my parents had entrusted to me. And the only person who would benefit from that transfer, the only person who'd shown unusual interest in my family's real estate, was the man who'd proposed to me on a sailboat, who'd slipped a diamond on my finger, who'd looked me in the eye last night, and suggested we date other people as insurance. Insurance for what, Graham? Insurance that you'd already secured your real objective before I figured out what you were really after. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my desk and made a list of everything that seemed wrong, every inconsistency, every lie by omission. The Tinder profile with no mention of our engagement, the estate planning attorney who specialized in asset concealment, the woman with the portfolio, the appraisal, the property transfer draft. The sudden suggestion we date other people just weeks before legally binding ourselves together. And one more thing I'd almost forgotten. 3 months ago, Graham had insisted we get life insurance policies. Good practice for married couples, he'd said, making sure we're protected. I'd agreed, purchased a $2.3 million policy with my parents as beneficiaries, the same policy my grandmother had established years ago. Now, in the quiet of 3 in the morning, I pulled up the insurance company's portal and logged into my account. The page loaded slowly, and when it appeared, I had to read it 3 times to believe what I was seeing. Beneficiary: Cecily Vance. Not my parents. Not even Graham, which would have made a sick kind of sense if he was planning to marry me. But Cecily Vance, a name I'd never heard before. Someone who meant nothing to me. I clicked through to the change history. The beneficiary had been updated 4 weeks ago with an electronic signature that was supposedly mine. Except, I'd never authorized that change. I'd never heard of Cecily Vance. I'd certainly never signed anything giving her claim to $2.3 million if something happened to me. Someone had forged my signature on insurance documents. Someone had ordered an appraisal of my home. Someone had initiated a property transfer draft. Someone had created a Tinder profile advertising his availability while planning a wedding. Someone had suggested we date other people 6 weeks before we were supposed to promise forever. And that someone was sleeping peacefully in his apartment downtown, probably already planning his next move, his next legal maneuver, his next step in whatever elaborate plan this was. I opened my laptop and started researching Cecily Vance. It took less than 10 minutes to find her LinkedIn profile. Paralegal at Whitlock and Hartwick, Graham's firm. 26 years old, graduated from Fordham 2 years ago. Current projects, including complex family law matters and estate planning support. The woman from the brownstone steps. The one Graham had been laughing with, touching casually, handing business cards to. She wasn't some random Tinder match. She was part of his plan, embedded in his workplace, positioned as beneficiary on my life insurance, connected to whatever scheme was unfolding around my inheritance. I took screenshots of everything: her profile, her education, her job description, the insurance change, the appraisal, the transfer draft. I created a folder on my desktop labeled Property Documents and saved it all there. Careful, methodical, building a record of something I didn't fully understand yet, but knew in my bones was dangerous. Dawn was breaking over the park when Graham texted, "Feeling better? Missing you?" I looked at those words, at the casual intimacy of them, at the performance of affection from someone who'd spent weeks or maybe months orchestrating something that had nothing to do with love. "Much better," I typed back. "See you tonight for that conversation? Can't wait. I think you're going to love what I have to say." "I bet you do," I thought, watching his text bubble disappear. "I bet you've got the whole pitch prepared, the whole argument structured like one of your legal briefs, every objection anticipated and countered." "But you weren't expecting me to start building my own case, were you, Graham? You weren't expecting me to find the appraisal, to discover Cecily Vance, to learn about Chambers and Associates and their specialty in asset concealment. You thought you were the only attorney in this relationship? You forgot that my great-grandmother didn't build the Ashford by being naive, that my grandmother didn't keep it running for 50 years by being trusting. That 3 generations of women had learned to recognize when someone saw us as property rather than people." I finished my coffee as the sun climbed higher, painting the penthouse in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere below, the city was waking up, millions of people starting their days, pursuing their ambitions, playing their games. And somewhere downtown, Graham Whitlock was probably reviewing his strategy, confident in his plan, certain of his victory. He had no idea I'd just entered the game. I met Theo at his office at 7 in the morning, before the support staff arrived, before the city fully woke up. His building occupied 3 floors of a converted warehouse in Tribeca, all exposed brick and industrial windows, the kind of carefully designed space that screamed success without shouting about it. He was waiting in the conference room with coffee and a legal pad already covered in notes. "Show me everything," he said. I spread the documents across the table like evidence at a crime scene. The appraisal, the insurance beneficiary change, screenshots of the property transfer draft, the Tinder profile, Cecily Vance's LinkedIn, photos of Graham entering Chambers and Associates. Each piece looked innocent on its own, but together they formed something darker, more deliberate. Theo studied each document in silence, his expression growing more serious with every page. When he finally looked up, his eyes held something I'd rarely seen from him: anger. "This isn't pre-wedding jitters," he said quietly. "This is systematic fraud. He's been planning this for months, maybe longer." "But planning what exactly?" I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug, needing its warmth. "To steal my property? To marry me and then divorce me immediately? None of it makes sense as a strategy." "It doesn't have to make sense to us. It has to make sense to whoever's running this operation." Theo pulled out his laptop. "Give me an hour. I'm calling in someone who specializes in exactly this kind of case." The someone turned out to be Dr. Adelaide York, a forensic accountant who arrived 90 minutes later carrying a messenger bag and an air of absolute competence. She was maybe 50, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a efficient bun and reading glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. Theo had worked with her on 3 major fraud cases, he explained, and she'd never lost. Dr. York listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes in a small leather journal. When I finished, she asked a single question. "Do you have access to your financial accounts?" "All of them?" I did. We spent the next 4 hours going through every bank statement, every credit report, every document with my name attached. And with each new screen, each new discovery, the picture became clearer and more terrifying. There was a bank account I'd never opened, established 7 months ago at a small credit union in Delaware. The opening balance, $50,000, transferred from what appeared to be my savings account. Except I'd never authorized that transfer, never received notification, never knew it existed. There was a credit application for an $800,000 line of credit submitted 6 weeks ago in my name, using the Ashford penthouse as collateral. The application had been approved. The money had been transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands 3 weeks ago. There was a revised prenuptial agreement, backdated to 8 months ago, that gave Graham 70% ownership of all marital property, including, and this was highlighted in yellow by whoever drafted it, real estate acquired before marriage, but improved or maintained during the engagement period. The signature at the bottom looked exactly like mine, down to the slight loop I made in the capital S. There was a notarized affidavit, supposedly signed by me, declaring that the Ashford penthouse had been jointly acquired and improved by both parties, and should be considered shared property. The notary stamp was from Delaware, dated 4 months ago. I'd been in Connecticut visiting my parents that entire week. There was the life insurance beneficiary change to Cecily Vance, complete with forged signature. And there was the property transfer draft Theo had found, prepared by Chambers and Associates, ready to file the moment we signed our marriage certificate. 6 documents, 6 forgeries, 8 months of methodical fraud. Dr. York removed her reading glasses and looked at me with something close to sympathy. "Ms. Ashford, this isn't a messy breakup situation. This isn't even a gold digger trying to marry into wealth. This is organized, sophisticated financial fraud, the kind that requires legal expertise, access to professional networks, and coordination across multiple jurisdictions. Graham's a corporate attorney," I said slowly. "He has all of that. Maybe." She tapped her pen against her journal. "But in my experience, this level of sophistication usually requires more than one person. Someone's coordinating this, someone with deeper connections than a junior partner at a law firm." Theo leaned forward. "Owen Hartwick. Graham's mentor, the one who's been pushing his partnership through." I remembered Graham mentioning Owen constantly. The lunches, the strategy sessions, the career guidance. Owen had been at Graham's promotion dinner, had toasted his success, had told me I was lucky to be marrying such a rising star. "We need more," Dr. York said. "We have evidence of fraud, but we need to understand the full scope. Why these specific documents? Why the offshore account? What's the end game?" She paused, studying me carefully. "And we need to move fast. Your engagement party is when?" "Tonight," I said, my stomach dropping. 7 o'clock, here at the Ashford." "Perfect." Dr. York's smile was sharp. "Nothing like a public venue with witnesses. But first, we need one more piece of the puzzle." She pulled up Cecily Vance's information on her laptop. "This paralegal, the one listed as your insurance beneficiary, she's the weak link. She's young, probably scared, definitely not sophisticated enough to be a mastermind. If Graham hired her to play a role, she might not know what she's really part of." "You want me to talk to her?" I said. "I want you to give her a way out." Dr. York's expression was serious. If she's been told this is legitimate, if she believes she's just helping with some kind of complicated legal arrangement, she'll crack the moment she realizes she's part of fraud. People who don't know they're criminals tend to become very cooperative when they find out they are. Theo pulled up Cecily's routine from her social media. Tagged locations, regular spots, patterns. She went to the same coffee shop every morning at 9. A small place 3 blocks from Whitlock and Hartwick's offices. Tomorrow was Saturday, but her Instagram showed her there on weekends too, usually working on her laptop. Go tomorrow morning, Theo said. Casual, unthreatening, just 2 women having coffee. And if she won't talk, Dr. York closed her laptop. Then we proceed without her testimony. But I think she'll talk. I think she'll be relieved to talk. I left Theo's office as the sun began setting, the sky turning that particular shade of pink that only happened in New York in autumn. Graham had texted 3 times, asking about my day, suggesting dinner, reminding me about the engagement party preparations. I'd responded with short, normal messages, playing the role of unsuspecting fiancé, while my phone grew heavy with the weight of what I now knew. That night, I couldn't eat. I stood at the penthouse windows watching the city lights flicker on, thinking about my great-grandmother breaking ground on this building in 1946. She'd been 32 years old, my age exactly, when she'd convinced a bank to loan her the money for construction. Women couldn't even have their own credit cards back then, but she'd found a way, fought for it, built something that would last 3 generations. And Graham thought he could just take it. Thought he could forge some signatures, file some papers, and erase 79 years of family history. My phone buzzed. Graham again. Can't wait to celebrate with you tomorrow night. You're going to be the most beautiful woman there. I looked at those words, at the calculated charm of them, and felt something harden in my chest. Not anger, exactly. Something colder. More focused. Can't wait either, I typed back. It's going to be a night no one forgets. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that made the city feel smaller, more intimate. I dressed carefully, jeans, a simple sweater, nothing that suggested confrontation. Then I walked the 6 blocks to Cecily's coffee shop, a place called Grind that tried too hard to be artisanal, with reclaimed wood tables and succulents in concrete planters. Cecily was exactly where her Instagram suggested she'd be, at a corner table with her laptop and a cappuccino. She was pretty in that carefully maintained way of young professionals, her hair blown straight, her makeup subtle but present, her outfit suggesting she was always ready for an important meeting. I bought my own coffee and approached her table. Cecily Vance? She looked up, confused, not yet alarmed. Yes? I'm Simone Ashford. I think we need to talk about Graham Whitlock. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. Her hands went to her laptop like she was going to close it, run, disappear. But she didn't. She just sat there, frozen, her eyes wide with something that looked like terror. I don't know what you think is happening, she started, her voice shaking. I sat down across from her, keeping my own voice calm, steady. How much is he paying you? The question clearly wasn't what she expected. She blinked, her mouth opening and closing like she was testing different responses, different lies. Then, quietly, $800 a week. For what? Cecily's eyes darted to the other customers, checking if anyone was listening. Everyone was absorbed in their own laptops, their own conversations. To date him, publicly, to be seen with him at restaurants, events, to make it look like we're together. My hands tightened around my coffee cup, but I kept my expression neutral. For how long? 3 months. The contract was for 3 months? She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, showed me a PDF. It came from Owen Hartwick's office, senior partner at Whitlock and Hartwick. He said it was relationship optics consulting. That Graham needed to appear more settled, more stable for his partnership review, that having a girlfriend would help his image. I read the contract on her screen. It was professionally drafted, complete with confidentiality clauses and payment schedules. $800 a week, paid through a consulting LLC, categorized as professional services. At the bottom, Owen Hartwick's signature. Did Graham tell you he was engaged? I asked. Cecily's face crumpled. He said you two had an open relationship, that you'd agreed to date other people while staying together. He said it was modern, progressive, that you understood he needed to explore his options before committing forever. The same language he'd used with me, the same framing, insurance, exploration, modern thinking. I'm not in an open relationship, I said quietly. I didn't agree to any of this. And Graham didn't just hire you to date him. He made you the beneficiary of my life insurance policy. $2.3 million if something happens to me. Cecily's laptop nearly fell off the table. What? No, that's not. I don't know anything about insurance. I just went to dinners, posted some photos, showed up at work events. That's all. Did he ever ask you to sign anything besides the dating contract? Her hands were shaking now, coffee forgotten. An NDA, standard confidentiality agreement, and… She stopped, her face going pale again. A witness statement. He said it was routine for the firm, just documenting that I'd observed some conversations about property arrangements. He said you and Graham had discussed how to handle real estate after the wedding, and he needed someone to verify that the conversations happened. What did the statement say? That I'd heard you both discuss transferring ownership of the Ashford penthouse into a joint marital trust. That you'd agreed to it verbally, multiple times, that it was your idea. She looked like she might be sick. But I never heard any of those conversations. I was never in the room when you two talked. Graham just gave me the statement and said to sign it, that it was a formality for estate planning purposes. There it was. The final piece. Cecily's false testimony would have been used to support the property transfer, to claim that I'd verbally agreed to give Graham ownership of my inheritance. Combined with the forged signatures, it would have created a paper trail suggesting everything was consensual, that I'd willingly handed over my family's property. Cecily? I leaned forward, keeping my voice gentle despite the fury building in my chest. You signed a false witness statement. You're listed as the beneficiary on a fraudulent insurance policy. You're part of a scheme to steal my family's property. Whether you knew it or not, you're implicated in fraud. Tears started running down her cheeks, mascara tracking in dark lines. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I thought it was just weird relationship stuff. I thought I was helping Graham look good for his partnership. He said you knew everything, that you'd approved everything. I believe you, I said, and I did. She was too terrified to be lying, too shocked to have been in on the planning. But now you need to decide what you're going to do. Because tonight, at my engagement party, I'm going to expose everything, every document, every forgery, every lie, and you're going to be mentioned as part of it. She wiped her face with shaking hands. What do you want me to do? Do you think Cecily should face consequences? Or is she a victim too? Comment below. I read every single one. Tell the truth, I said. Come to the party tonight. Bring your contract, your NDA, that witness statement. Tell everyone exactly what happened, exactly what you were told. Cooperate with the authorities when they investigate. And maybe, just maybe, you'll get through this without criminal charges. Cecily nodded, still crying. The party. What time? 7 o'clock, the Ashford rooftop. Can I count on you? Yes. She pulled a folder from her bag with shaking hands. Here, this is everything. The contract, the NDA, the statement. I have digital copies too, but take these. I don't want them anymore. I took the folder, feeling its weight in my hands. Evidence, testimony. Another nail in Graham's elaborate coffin. Thank you, I said, standing. You're doing the right thing. She just nodded, staring at her laptop screen without seeing it, probably recalculating her entire life, understanding how close she'd come to something much worse than embarrassment. I left the coffee shop and walked back to the Ashford through the drizzle, Cecily's folder tucked under my jacket. The party was in 11 hours. 11 hours to prepare, to finalize the documents, to set the stage for the most public confrontation of my life. Theo and Dr. York arrived at the penthouse at 3 in the afternoon, both carrying file boxes. They'd spent the morning preparing presentation materials, binders for key guests, a forensic timeline showing every fraudulent transaction, printed evidence of each forged signature, with expert analysis comparing them to my actual writing. Judge Brennan confirmed she's coming, Theo said, setting up his laptop to connect to the rooftop's projection system. Family friend? Right? My grandmother's college roommate. She's been to every major event in my life. I thought about Patricia Brennan, 73 years old, 20 years on the family court bench, absolutely intolerant of fraud. She's going to be furious. Good, Dr. York said. Fury from a sitting judge is exactly what we need. We worked through the afternoon, organizing evidence, rehearsing key points, preparing for every possible counter-argument Graham might make. By 6 o'clock, everything was in place. The rooftop had been decorated by the event team I'd hired weeks ago. String lights, cocktail tables, a bar, a small stage for toasts. 43 guests had confirmed, including 2 more judges, several attorneys, Graham's parents, my parents, and half the society connections that made up our merged social circles. At 6:30, I changed into the dress I'd chosen weeks ago. Deep emerald green silk that matched my grandmother's necklace, elegant without being flashy. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked calm, determined, nothing like the person who'd sat in Maria 4 days ago, watching her fiancé suggest they date other people. My phone buzzed. Graham, where are you? Guests arriving. Don't embarrass me. Don't embarrass me. Not, I miss you, or can't wait to see you. Don't embarrass me, like I was an employee who might make a scene, a liability to manage. I texted back, almost ready. See you soon. Then I heard the penthouse door open, heard Graham's voice calling my name. He wasn't supposed to be up here yet. The party was on the rooftop, 2 floors up. But he'd used his key, let himself in, his footsteps echoing through the space my great-grandmother had designed. I found him in the living room, wearing his best suit, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He smiled when he saw me. That practiced smile he'd used 1,000 times. You look incredible, he said, offering me a glass. I wanted a moment alone before the chaos starts. I took the champagne but didn't drink. Graham, what are you really doing here? His smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? I'm here for our engagement party. No. I set the glass down on the piano my grandmother had played. Why are you really here? In this apartment? Why did you come up early? Something shifted in his expression, the mask slipping just enough to show calculation underneath. I know you talked to Cecily. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my voice steady. So? So she's lying. She's trying to protect herself. He moved closer, his voice dropping to that reasonable tone he used in negotiations. Simone, she's unstable. She's been making claims about me, about the firm. We're actually in the process of letting her go. Whatever she told you, it's fabricated. She's angry about losing her job. She showed me the contract, Graham. The one from Owen Hartwick's office. $800 a week to pretend to be your girlfriend. He laughed, smooth and dismissive. That's consulting work, completely legitimate. She helped with client entertainment, corporate events. The optics thing is just how HR categorized it. You're reading way too much into normal business practices. And the witness statement, where she claims she heard me agree to transfer my property? His jaw tightened, just for a second. Then the smile returned. Estate planning. We discussed it. You agreed. She was present. I don't see the problem. I never agreed to anything. I never discussed transferring my property. And Cecily was never in any room where you and I talked about personal matters. Graham's expression hardened. The charm dropped away, replaced by something colder. If you make a scene tonight, If you embarrass me in front of 40 guests, including 3 senior partners from my firm, I will file a defamation suit so fast your head will spin. 12 partners, Simone. 12 attorneys who will bury you in litigation for the next decade. Is that what you want? He pulled out his phone, holding it up like a weapon. One call, that's all it takes. One call, and your reputation is destroyed. Everyone will know you as the unstable woman who sabotaged her own engagement, who made wild accusations against a respected attorney. Who do you think they'll believe? Me, with my law degree and partnership and professional network? Or you, with your paranoid theories about dating contracts? I felt it then, the old fear, the familiar weight of his manipulation, the way he'd always been able to make me doubt myself, question my own perceptions, wonder if I was overreacting. For 3 years, he'd been doing this, and I'd let him, believing his version of reality over my own instincts. My hand trembled slightly. I could feel myself starting to back down, starting to wonder if maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe there were explanations. Maybe I was about to ruin everything based on circumstantial evidence, and then his phone screen lit up with an incoming text. Just for a second, just long enough for me to read the preview. Owen Hartwick. Prenup signed yet? We need those assets for the Riverside merger. Board meeting Monday. The Riverside merger. Board meeting. Those assets. Not your marriage. Not your future together. Those assets. The penthouse. My inheritance. The property that was supposed to become collateral for a business deal. I looked at Graham. Really looked at him. And finally saw what I'd been refusing to see for months. This was never about love. It was never even about wanting my money for himself. It was about his career, his partnership, his mentor's business deals. I was just the transaction that would prove he could deliver, that he could close deals, that he deserved his seat at the table. This was never about us, was it? I said quietly. Graham's expression shifted one more time, the mask cracking completely. Don't be dramatic, Simone. We can still make this work. We can still have a good life together. You just need to be reasonable about the financial arrangements. Get out of my apartment. Simone, get out, now, before I call security and have you removed from the building. He stared at me for a long moment, trying to decide if I was bluffing. Then he saw something in my face that made him step back. Fine. But you're making a huge mistake. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not seeing you clearly sooner. He left without another word, and I heard the elevator close. Carrying him up to the rooftop where 43 guests were gathering, drinking champagne, celebrating an engagement that had ended the moment I read that text about the Riverside merger. I took 3 deep breaths, checked my makeup in the hall mirror, and followed him upstairs. The rooftop looked magical, exactly as I'd imagined when I'd planned this party months ago. String lights crisscrossed the space like captured stars. The city stretched out in every direction, buildings glowing against the evening sky. Music played softly from hidden speakers. Guests mingled with cocktails, their laughter and conversation, creating that particular buzz of successful parties. Graham stood near the bar, already surrounded by colleagues from his firm, his parents, his network. He saw me emerge from the elevator, and his eyes held a warning. Don't you dare. I walked past him to where Theo and Dr. York stood near the projection screen, both dressed for the party, but carrying tablets with all our evidence queued and ready. Judge Brennan was talking to my parents near the railing, elegant in navy silk, her steel gray hair perfectly styled. Everyone's here, Theo murmured. Cecily just arrived. She's terrified, but she's holding it together. I spotted her near the elevator, clutching a folder, looking like she might bolt at any second. I caught her eye and nodded, and she took a shaky breath. Graham tapped his champagne glass, the crystal ringing out clear and bright. The conversations died down. Everyone turned to watch him, smiling, anticipating the traditional toast. Thank you all for being here tonight, he began, his voice carrying across the rooftop. It means the world to Simone and me to celebrate this milestone with the people we love most. We're so grateful for your support as we begin this next chapter together. He looked directly at me, his eyes challenging, to my beautiful fiancé and our future together. To Simone and Graham, the guests echoed, raising their glasses. I let them drink. Let the champagne touch their lips. Let Graham think he'd won this round. Then I stood, my own glass raised. Actually, Graham's right. We should talk about our future together, specifically, the future of this penthouse. I turned to face the crowd, because apparently, that's what this has all been about. Theo pressed a button, and the projection screen behind me lit up with the first document, the property appraisal Graham had ordered without my knowledge. 3 weeks ago, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart, my fiancé had my home appraised. The Ashford penthouse, worth $4.7 million. Property my family has owned since 1946. I didn't authorize this appraisal. I didn't even know about it until I found the paperwork hidden in my files. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Graham's face had gone pale. Simone, this isn't... Let me finish. I nodded to Theo, who clicked to the next slide. This is a property transfer draft prepared by Chambers and Associates, dated 2 weeks ago. It would transfer 70% ownership of my home to a marital trust with Graham as trustee. Notice the signature at the bottom? That's supposed to be mine, except I never signed it. The next slide appeared, my actual signature next to the forged one, with Dr. York's forensic analysis highlighting the differences. Expert analysis confirms this is a forgery, as is this one. Another slide, the life insurance beneficiary change, and this one, the bank account authorization, and this one, the credit application for $800,000. 6 documents, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. 6 forged signatures. $800,000 transferred to an offshore account in my name. A prenup backdated 8 months with illegal notarization. A witness statement claiming I verbally agreed to transfer my property. I paused, looking directly at Graham. All while you were suggesting we date other people as some kind of insurance policy. Graham tried to interrupt, but Theo stepped forward. I'm Theodore Kim, Ms. Ashford's attorney. These documents constitute identity theft, real estate fraud, and wire fraud. We have documentation of every transaction, every forgery, every illegal transfer. Dr. York joined him. I'm Dr. Adelaide York, forensic accountant. I've analyzed the complete financial trail. Wire transfers totaling $1.2 million from accounts opened fraudulently in Ms. Ashford's name. Funds routed through shell companies to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. This is organized, systematic fraud. Then Cecily stood, her voice shaking, but clear. I'm Cecily Vance. I worked, as a paralegal at Whitlock and Hartwick. Graham and Owen Hartwick paid me $800 a week to pretend to be Graham's girlfriend, to be seen with him publicly, to make him look settled and stable. She held up her folder. This is my contract, paid through a consulting LLC. Owen Hartwick's signature is on it. He called it Relationship Optics Consulting. The rooftop had gone completely silent. Every eye was on her. They also asked me to sign a witness statement, Cecily continued, tears streaming down her face, claiming I'd heard Simone agree to transfer her property to Graham, but I was never in any room where they discussed personal matters. I never heard any of those conversations. I just signed what they gave me because they said it was routine paperwork. She walked forward and handed me the folder. This is everything. The contract, the NDA, the false statement. I didn't know I was part of fraud, but I'm telling the truth now. Judge Patricia Brennan stood up, her face carved from stone. Simone, I need to see those documents. All of them. Theo handed her a prepared binder. She studied each page in silence, her jaw tightening with every new piece of evidence. The rooftop stayed frozen, guests holding cocktails they'd forgotten about, watching a celebration transform into something else entirely. After 60 seconds, that felt like hours. Judge Brennan looked up. This notarization is fraudulent. A Delaware stamp on a New York prenup, notarized by someone not licensed in either state. This document is void. She turned to Graham, her voice cold with authority. Mr. Whitlock, I'm issuing a verbal temporary restraining order, effective immediately. You are not to access, transfer, or encumber any property connected to Ms. Ashford. You are not to contact her except through legal counsel. You are not to enter the Ashford building except to retrieve personal belongings under supervision. A formal written order will be filed Monday morning. She looked around the rooftop at the assembled witnesses. I'm also recommending these materials to the district attorney's office for review of criminal charges, wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, real estate fraud. These are serious federal crimes. Graham's phone rang, the sound cutting through the silence like an alarm. He fumbled for it, his hand shaking, but Theo was faster, stepping forward and putting it on speaker before Graham could decline. Owen Hartwick's voice filled the rooftop. Did she sign? We need that property for collateral on the Riverside deal. The board meeting's Monday and we need to show secured assets or the merger falls apart. Graham, if you can't close this, I'll find someone who can. The call ended. In the silence that followed, I could hear traffic from the street below, hear the city breathing around us. Secure assets, I repeated softly. The Riverside deal. You were never planning to marry me, Graham. You were planning to acquire my property as collateral for your mentor's business merger. Graham tried to speak, but nothing came out. His parents were staring at him in horror. The partners from his firm were already moving away, distancing themselves, recognizing a liability when they saw one. Security arrived. I'd called them during the presentation, knowing this moment would come. 2 men in discreet black suits. Mr. Whitlock needs to leave the building, I told them. Please escort him out. Graham finally found his voice. You're insane. You're all insane. This is a misunderstanding. I can explain. But no one was listening. Security took his arms gently but firmly, and he let himself be led toward the elevator, his face collapsing as he passed his colleagues, his parents, his network, everyone who'd witnessed his exposure. As he disappeared into the elevator, guests began to move. 3 of them were attorneys. They approached Theo immediately, offering cards, volunteering to testify, asking to photograph evidence. The firm's other partners huddled together, clearly discussing damage control. My phone buzzed with a text from the bank. Fraudulent account frozen, funds recovery process initiated. Another from the insurance company. Beneficiary change reversed. Policy restored to original status. The cascade had begun. Graham's partnership? Revoked by the time the elevator reached the ground floor, according to a text Theo showed me from one of the senior partners. The offshore account, flagged by international banking regulators within the hour. The Delaware account, closed and funds seized. Everything he'd built, everything he'd planned, collapsing in real time. Guests began leaving, some stopping to squeeze my hand, to offer support, to promise their testimony. My parents stayed close, my mother's arm around my shoulders, both of them still processing what they'd witnessed. Judge Brennan approached as the crowd thinned. You did exactly the right thing, Simone. Exposing fraud publicly, with witnesses, is the strongest possible position. I'll personally monitor the DA's review. Men like that don't get to steal family legacies and walk away. Theo stayed until the last guest left, until the caterers had packed up, until the rooftop was empty except for string lights and the memory of what had happened here. We'll file the civil suit Monday, he said. Estimated damages between 2 and 3 million, plus attorney fees. And the criminal case? That's going to federal court. Wire fraud across state lines, offshore accounts, forged legal documents. He's looking at serious prison time if convicted. Cecily had stayed too, sitting at one of the cocktail tables, clutching her folder. I'm so sorry, she whispered when I approached. I really didn't know. I believe you, I said. And you did the right thing tonight. That took courage. She nodded, wiping her eyes. What happens to me now? You cooperate with the investigation. You testify honestly. And with luck, the DA will see you as a witness rather than a co-conspirator. I paused. But you might want to find a new job. Whitlock and Hartwick is going to have some serious problems once this goes public. After everyone left, I stood alone on the rooftop terrace, the city spreading out below me in patterns of light and shadow. The dress code had required cocktail attire, but I'd worn my grandmother's necklace, emeralds, that had watched 3 generations of Ashford women navigate the world. Men built, I picked up the property deed Theo had left on the table, the one showing my name, only my name, as owner of the Ashford penthouse. 79 years of family history, almost stolen by forged signatures and offshore accounts. I spent 6 years with someone who saw me as a transaction, I said aloud, to the city, to the memory of the women who'd built this place, who looked at my home and saw collateral, who thought love was something you could forge on a signature line. I looked at the building around me, the place my great-grandmother had constructed brick by brick in an era that told her she couldn't. I almost let him take it, not because he was clever, because I'd forgotten this was mine. I set down the deed and picked up my coffee from earlier, now cold but comforting in its weight. I won't forget again. The breeze picked up, carrying the scent of rain. The party was over. The confrontation was done. Tomorrow the lawyers would file paperwork. The DA would open investigations. The wheels of justice would start their slow grinding. But tonight, I had my home, my inheritance, my future. I started gathering empty champagne flutes, thinking about calling the cleaning service, about Monday morning, about rebuilding my life without Graham's calculated presence in it. Then something caught my eye. On one of the tables, mixed with Graham's belongings that security had left behind, his jacket, his keys, his wallet, a business card had fallen out, face up on the glass surface. I picked it up, reading by the light of the string lights overhead. Riverside Capital Partners, Owen Hartwick, Managing Director, Cayman Corporate Center, Suite 402. The same address I'd seen on the offshore account statements. The same account that had received $800,000 in fraudulent transfers. The same account that Dr. York had traced back through shell companies and wire transfers. Owen Hartwick wasn't just Graham's mentor at the law firm. He was the managing director of Riverside Capital Partners. He ran the merger deal that needed my property as collateral. He'd signed Cecily's contract. He'd pushed for the prenup, the transfers, the whole elaborate scheme. Graham wasn't the mastermind. He was never smart enough to orchestrate something this sophisticated. He was just the front man, the fiancé, the face of the operation, the real architect of this fraud, the one who designed every piece, every forgery, every step was still out there, still running his investment firm, still planning deals that required secured assets. Still looking for the next person to exploit, the next inheritance to steal? I pocketed the business card, feeling its weight like a promise. Graham was done, exposed, facing federal charges, his career destroyed. But Owen Hartwick? He thought he'd gotten away clean, thought his protege taking the fall was the end of it, thought he could just move on to the next scheme, the next victim. He had no idea I now had his business card. No idea I knew about Riverside Capital Partners. No idea that Dr. York could trace money anywhere it tried to hide. I turned the card over in my fingers, studying the embossed lettering, the expensive cardstock, the Cayman address printed in discreet gray ink. Owen had built an entire offshore operation, hidden behind law firm respectability and mentorship lunches. How many other Graham Whitlocks had he cultivated? How many other young attorneys desperate for partnership had he turned into instruments of fraud? How many other families had lost property, inheritance, legacies because Owen Hartwick needed secured assets for his deals? The $800,000 hadn't been Graham's greed. It had been Owen's down payment, his collateral arrangement for the Riverside merger. Graham had just been the access point, the fiancé who could get close enough to forge signatures, close enough to make theft look like love. Dr. York would find the paper trail. She always did. Shell companies had to file documents somewhere. Wire transfers left digital footprints. Offshore accounts required paperwork, authorization, trails of evidence that led back to whoever controlled them. And Owen controlled Riverside. Capital Partners. Owen had signed Cecily's contract. Owen's voice had confirmed the whole scheme on speakerphone in front of 43 witnesses. He'd been too arrogant, too confident in Graham's ability to close the deal, too certain that even if something went wrong, he'd remain safely behind the scenes, the respected senior partner who'd simply trusted his protege's judgment. But Graham had kept Owen's business card in his wallet, had carried evidence of the connection, had probably kept other records too, emails and meeting notes and proof that the orders came from above. Men like Graham always kept insurance against their mentors, always documented who gave which instructions. And now, I had access to all of it. Graham's apartment, his files, his phone records. The DA's investigation would pull everything, would follow every thread back to its source. Owen had 48 hours, maybe less, before federal investigators started asking questions about Riverside Capital Partners and why its managing director was coordinating fraud through his law firm. I stood on the rooftop of the building my great-grandmother built, the city glowing below, and felt something I hadn't felt in 6 years of being with Graham. Clarity, not anger, not fear, not confusion, just absolute, perfect clarity about what came next. The wedding was canceled, the fraud was exposed, the immediate threat was neutralized, but the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, I wouldn't forget whose building this was, whose inheritance this was, whose fight this was. Owen Hartwick had made a critical mistake. He'd assumed that winning against Graham meant winning against me. He was about to learn the difference between those two things. I looked down at the business card one more time, memorizing the address, the phone number, the arrogant simplicity of the design. Then I walked to the elevator, ready to start planning the next phase, the one Owen Hartwick didn't see coming. Because that's what Ashford women do. We build, we protect, we endure. And when someone tries to take what's ours, we make sure they regret it.